And so Game Week 13 is here and it is free hit time for those of us not on a wild card like myself. And it's a big call this week, which draft to go with. It is a big call who to bring in on that free hit. And I'm here with 5 drafts for you, not 1, not 2, but 5 possible drafts for you to consider throughout the week before making your final decision. And these drafts, they come from a variety of strategic styles in the game. These drafts have various pros and cons, and we're going to talk all the way through them all. Because this is a big call, we can't deny the free hit. If you are not on a wild card and this is your free hit, then this is where the rest of the season is. It's make or break. It is all on this week. Without putting too fine a point on it, everything comes down to Game Week 33 and how we negotiate it. So let's get straight into it with the first draft. And I call this the sensible draft. And I call it that because it is very similar to the wildcard team. It is Verbruggen in goal, Senesi, Hill and Mateus Nunes, given Nico O'Reilly is possibly injured. If Nico O'Reilly is fit, it would be Nico O'Reilly. Then it's Gross, Palmer, Tavernier and Semenyo in midfield with Calvert-Lewin, Joao Pedro and Erling Haaland up front. Look, this is not an exciting draft. You've seen this team, you've seen this exact formation, you've seen everything about this in last week's content because that's the one all the wildcarders have gone for. Like the bench, it doesn't really matter on a free hit. You could have Van Heck in your team ahead of one of the other players, but it doesn't really matter. It's all about those 11 on the pitch. And this is the thing, you can't really take a gamble on O'Reilly because if he's fit for one game, then you've lost out on one game. And it's better to just go with like a Nunes or a Gehi or somebody else who will get the 2 games. So I'm not keen on this draft. It's not the draft that sets my soul aflutter. It is not the draft that sets my heart on fire, but it makes sense. Because this is a week, on the free hit, it is very difficult to find an edge. But we will find one, don't you worry. But it is very difficult because the wildcarders, of course, have the bench boost. They have those 4 extra players, up to 8 extra games. Although some of them have got Gabriel, some of them have got Bruno Fernandes, so it's only 6 extra games for them. So what is good about this draft is it does mitigate the risk. You know, you're probably going to beat most teams that aren't on a trip. You're probably going to beat the dead teams that are in the game. I think Ragabolly said there's only 44% of teams active in the last 3 game weeks. Now, I think you should go over 5 game weeks because you can roll 5 transfers, but Ragabolly knows this better than I do from livefpl.net, and he says 44% of teams still active. So that's 56% of teams not active that this draft should beat. And some of those teams will be ahead of you. A lot will be behind you. A lot will be in that rear view mirror. But some of them will be ahead of you. And this draft, it mitigates the risk of the wild card while giving you the edge over the non-trip users. Or those of us like myself who prefer a more risky approach. So we don't need to spend too much on that because you've seen this draft talked about by everyone all week. Last week, it is what it is. The second draft I want to talk about is, if I can find it on my phone, the medium risk draft. This is very similar to the wildcarders draft, very similar to that sensible draft, just with a few tweaks to give you the chance of gaining a bit of an edge. So in this draft, I've gone with Darlow in goal instead of Verbruggen. I've gone with Van Heck, Mateus Nunes and James Hill in defence. You know, it sounds boring, but it is. They're all under 10% owned. So, you know, it's still an edge. You know, and then in midfield, Palmer, of course, and then it's got Scott from Bournemouth, Gomez from Brighton, and Shirky instead of Semenyo, and then up front you've got Joao Pedro and Haaland with Krupi Jr. Now, this is where the medium risk here really comes in the form of the Bournemouth players, because a lot of people will have Tavernier, a lot of people will have the double defence. And it makes sense, you know. I'll get into the Bournemouth defence shortly, but it makes sense to go for those players. But here, you know, you could have the double defence because of the DEFCONs, or you could get Scott, who is also a bit of a DEFCON monster. He's just shown he can get the goal. You know, is he going to have that late drive towards the England squad where, you know, there's always one player. It was Adam Wharton last time. There's always that one player that everyone needs to focus on, that if only England had started them, they would have won the entire trophy. Could well be Alex Scott this season after that goal against Arsenal. Could be anyone really, but Scott is certainly in the running for that nominative role. Gomez instead of Gross in midfield. Look, Diego Gomez, if he didn't have that yellow card hanging over him last week, he would have been in a lot more drafts because he gets the DEFCONs. He's got DEFCONs in his last 3 games. He's got 2 goals and an assist in his last few games as well. He's getting the minutes, you know, 90, 90, 87. I think his last 3 games were. It's a good risk. It's a good risk to take on Gross. Will Gross play 2 games in a week? We just don't know. We don't know because he is old. He probably will. The chase in Europe, but he's a bit older. So Gomez, exciting option, multiple routes to points. Shirky over Semenyo. Look, I'm really hot on Shirky. And, you know, Semenyo is the safe pick. You know, you could substitute out any of these players for the safer options and just go with a handful of them. You know, you don't need... you could go with Senesi instead of Scott and keep Shirky. You could go with Scott over Senesi but get Semenyo. You could still have those routes to points while, you know, the ceiling is lowered but the floor is raised in comparison to the rest of the wildcarders. But Shirky, I really like him as an option. And these are tight games. They're going to be playing Arsenal, very tight. If you think Arsenal are doing anything other than playing for a 0-0 on the weekend, I mean, they're struggling. They are struggling, Arsenal, and Shirky could be the man to unlock them. You saw the way he unlocked Chelsea with that pass to Gahey. Beautiful. Shirky, I really like him as an option. He is a good one to take on Semenyo, and if it pays off, you beat the vast majority of the field, whether they are on a wild card, a free hit, or not, because Semenyo is so highly owned. Up front, Haaland and Pedro, that's fine, you know. They are the go-to forwards. It would be a bit naive to go without either. Certainly going without both is a bit of a risk. But Krupi Jr. I do like, and you could go with Evan Nilsson in this role, but that Krupi Jr. is getting so many goals per minute. His goals per minute ratio is ridiculous. Will he start both? Probably not. He'll probably have 1 start and 1 bench, would be my guess. But, you know, he's a good player. And who's he playing? Newcastle. Like, I mean, I talked a lot about Newcastle yesterday. I don't want to go over old ground, but we have lost something like 7 in 10 in the league. We got smashed by Barcelona, 7-2. Most of our team look like they're saving themselves for the World Cup or for a big move. And Eddie Howe has a problem against Bournemouth. It was only like last season, maybe the season before, they came to St James's, smashed 4 past us. Kirkes with a great goal towards the end. Could happen again. Football has a funny way of flipping the script, and Eddie Howe is under real pressure at Newcastle. And it would be sad but also quite poetic if Bournemouth came to... the club he built, Bournemouth, came to St James's Park and ended his reign as Newcastle manager. It could happen, and Krupi Jr. could be the man to put that nail in the coffin. You know, obviously it's a risk. Darlow over Verbruggen. You know, Darlow's got that game against Wolves. Verbruggen, you know, Brighton should win both the games, you'd think. Well, they should beat Spurs. Chelsea, probably a bit more 50-50, but I think Chelsea is struggling at the minute. But can you imagine Verbruggen keeping 2 clean sheets? I don't know. Darlow has Wolves. You know, and that Wolves game could be the clean sheet you need. And, you know, it's a medium risk. Going against a goalkeeper with a different goalkeeper, also with 2 games, is a medium risk. Not worth overthinking. So, after that, what's going on here? So we've had the sensible draft, we've had the medium risk draft. I've figured out my phone. The third draft, this is where it gets a bit interesting. And we'll go with the third draft being the DEFCON draft. And this is very different. This is a very, you're not going to see anybody go with something like this, really, except maybe my man Marcelo, because he's hot on the DEFCONs. But I've got Darlow in goal. Could be anyone, really, but it's the makeup of the rest of the team. So I've got Darlow in goal. Van Heck, Truffert, Senesi, Strauch and Hill in defence. Vifa, Ampadu, Palmer and Gomez in midfield with Haaland up front. And now, Joao Pedro, the first sub. You could bring in Pedro for any of those players, really. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is a stupid draft. You know, you've got the pick of the attacking players, and you've gone with Ampadu, you've gone with Vifa, you've gone with 5 defenders. But hear me out. In a double game week, it's all about a point accumulation. Is it better to risk? You know, you could get 1 assist from Pascal Gross. You could get an assist and a blank, and that's 7 points. Vifa could get 8 points just from DEFCON's playing in defence. Of course, raises that DEFCON ceiling. It's not about the fact he scored twice, although that was a bonus. If you went there, it obviously raises him in our estimation for the free hit. Can he repeat it? Probably not. Can he repeat the DEFCONs? Of course, they are a repeatable action. And Gomez as well from Brighton. Like I said earlier, lots of DEFCONs. So there's them. And Pardew. I think it was something like 15 or 16 DEFCONs already this season. Can he get them in these 2 games? If he does, that's 8 points. Can you find, can Shirky beat 8 points? Probably. You'd think so. But if he only gets 1 assist in 2 games, if he gets benched for one of them for a Foden ahead of the Cup semi-final, then, is he going to beat Ampadu? If Ampadu gets 8 points, if he keeps a clean sheet, that's 9 points. If he somehow finds an attacking return, that's 12 points at a minimum, plus bonus. And that's the thing with these DEFCONs. Cole Palmer, you got the DEFCONs. Like, you could go Caicedo, but his DEFCON seem to have dried up over Rosinia because, the AI LinkedIn manager doesn't know how to defend. And Palmer actually got them at the weekend in Gameweek 32, so, stick him in. You've got a penalty taker there. You could go with Scott instead of Palmer, but then you'd have to find a different defender. Not the end of the world, but them 3 Bournemouth defenders, so good for DEFCONs. If they keep a clean sheet, you're talking 8, 12, 24 points, 36 points off those 3 players. If Truffert gets the DEFCONs. Truffert isn't as hot on the DEFCONs as Senesi and Hill, but he's very good for them, and he does, of course, get the attacking returns quite frequently. I think he is the joint highest scoring left-back in the division at the minute in recent form. Maybe, you're going to have to, you've got to think of O'Reilly as well, but he got a lot of his from midfield, so does he count? Well, doesn't really matter in FPL, they're all defenders. So, yeah, and then Van Heck and Strauch. If all of those players get DEFCONs in every match, then that's, that's 40 points from your defence before any potential bonus, before any potential attacking returns, before any potential clean sheets. If they all keep 1 clean sheet, those 5 defenders, that 40 points goes up to 60 points before bonus, before attacking returns. It's so powerful, the DEFCONs, and then your midfield. Say 3 of them get 24 points from the DEFCONs. If they all keep 1 clean sheet, then that's another 3 points, so 27. So if these players all keep 1 clean sheet, you're on 67 points, plus your keeper, plus Palmer, plus Captain Haaland. You're laughing like. And maybe it is too extreme to go full DEFCON, but it's not like most players are getting these returns consistently. And even when they do, they're struggling to match the DEFCON daddies. Morgan Rogers, he gets the assist. Great stuff. But if he blanks next week, that's 7 points. These DEFCON daddies have got 8 and they're just running around the pitch getting hit by the ball. It's like, it's certainly one to consider. Now, you will say, where's Elliot Anderson? You've been so high on Elliot Anderson. Of course I have. But at the same time, this is a free hit. And if you're ever going to take a gamble on a double game week player over a single game week player, it might as well be on free hit. You might as well chance a Vifa or a Gomez over an Elliot Anderson because they can still get the DEFCONs, but they've got 2 games. So, and then we move on to the differential draft. And look, this draft, you're probably not going to go for it. I would never go anywhere near something like this because it is pretty extreme. And the differential draft is Darlow in goal, Nunes, Truffett, Gusto and Aït-Nouri in defence, Estevao, Neto, Tavernier, Shirky and Jadon Anthony in midfield with Krupa Jr. up front. Every player under 5% owned, except for Krupa Jr., who's 5.6, and that Ryan Shirky, who is the highest owned at 7.5%. The bench for Bruggen, Welbeck, Justin Fleming. The bench is irrelevant because it's a double game week, really. You could bring in Welbeck if you really wanted. Look, you're not going to go for this draft because it would be very naive to go for this draft. This is what we could call this the D-unit draft because this is the sort of thing he'll be looking at and saying it's got a real chance. It doesn't have a real chance, but it's important to consider these other options because they are, whatever draft you come up with, knowing these are all good players. These are all players with that potential, Darlow fine, Nunes and Aït-Nouri. If O'Reilly is out, Aït-Nouri is going to be left back, and we know what he can do going forward. Malo Gusto, he's got an 18-pointer in him. Brace of goals earlier in the season. Will he get that this week? Probably not. Chelsea are a bit over the top, but if you wanted a Chelsea defender, Malo Gusto at 2% is not a bad one on a free hit. Truffett, I've talked about before. Estevao, he hasn't had a lot of minutes. He probably deserved more minutes than he had, but he's so dangerous. If you wanted a fun, spicy punt, Estevao at 1.8% owned could be him. Excuse me. Pedro Neto, probably less exciting, but at the same time, a lot more consistent. The points keep ticking over for Neto. Never really spectacular. Could he outscore Cole Palmer? Of course he could. Cole Palmer is still not 100%. Or if he is, he's just not the player that we thought he was, And we're going to have this question about Cole Palmer at some point because he's had one great season and then he's kind of settled back into the pack. Sorry, my mouth's a bit dry. Is Cole Palmer truly a world-class player or did he have a world-class season? This is the question Palmer has to answer and he's probably not going to answer it this season. We'll have to see. Tavernier, only 4.7% owned. I feel that'll have to be a bit higher. Maybe that's in 4.7% of teams because he was benched this week. I don't know. But Tavernier, penalties, a lot of attacking threat, a lot of danger going forward. He's come so close to huge hauls in recent weeks. Could this be the one? It's always worth having a penalty-taking differential. Shirky, I've talked about. Jadon Anthony, look, I've mentioned him in a few videos now, both on this channel and on others. If anyone's going to do anything for Burnley, it's probably him. And he's scored against both Forest and Man City already this season. Is he going to do it? Probably not. Is he going to somehow hit a 25-pointer? You'd have to say no. Likelihood is he probably won't outscore Elliot Anderson next week. But if you wanted to take a chance, why not take a chance on someone that's scored against both his opponents? And then Krupa Jr. up front, like I said it before, just a great goal scorer and a scorer of great goals. The big thing with the differential, there's no Pedro, there's no Haaland, there is no Cole Palmer, and this is why you probably won't go with them. It's just not worth taking those players on, really, because on a free hit, you've got enough scope in the rest of the squad to do the damage. But it's just for your consideration. Have a look at those sort of options and see where you feel. And look, I've not got a lot of leads in here, and maybe I should have. I've got James Justin on the bench there. You know, the problem with Leeds is they've got no stack and the defence is struggling. And I just don't think on a free hit you need them. You know, on a wild card, and if you want 15 doublers on a wild card, it makes sense to get Leeds because you don't really want Burnley. On a free hit, I just don't think it does make sense. Maybe Calvert-Lewin against Wolves could do the business, but Calvert-Lewin has not done a lot recently. I'm hoping he does something tonight to fire me into that top 1 million properly, but, you know, we'll just have to see. The final draft, and this is the one I actually like the most at the moment, and it is the stacking draft. If you don't know stacking theory, it's something I heard first from Praz, and a lot of the Solio boys are really hot on stacking. You saw JC, Johnny Spaceman, earlier in the season, 42 points on his first free hit from 3 Brentford defenders, with Keller going big, with Lewis Potter getting the brace, and I think it was Collins. And the stacking theory says, if you can call the clean sheet, you might as well have 3 defenders. If you can call the attacking hauls, you might as well have 3 attackers from the same team. It's a high-risk strategy. But in free hit 33, it could pay off big style, you know. And for me, I've gone with stacking the Bournemouth defence with Senesi, Truffert and Hill. You've got the Defcons, you've got the Defcons slightly less but more attacking threat. And of course, Hill and Senesi are not shy of an attacking return either. If they can keep the clean sheet against Newcastle, which is a possibility, we have to admit that, you know, like, they can keep a clean sheet against Newcastle and they all get Defcons, that's, 8, 16, 24 points from your defence with a home game against Leeds to come. They are all capable of the attacking returns. It just makes sense. I've got Verbruggen in goal because, you know, it could be whoever. And then in the attack, I've got Palmer and Pedro because obviously you don't need me talking about them. Haaland, Semenyo and Shirky, because why not go for the triple Man City attack when they are looking this hungry, when they are hunting down the Arsenal? And I do think they could put the Arsenal to the sword. And if they do, it's Burnley after that and the title race. You know, if they beat the Arsenal 2-0, 3-0, they're going to Burnley knowing a win takes them top of the table. And they're going to put them to the sword. Why not get the triple up on attack? We can't know. We don't know who will get the points, but we have to assume the points are going to be there. So why not stack the attack from Man City and get in amongst it? And then alongside that, I've got Welbeck and I've got Gomez from Brighton. Could be Weaver, could be, you know, whichever you prefer. Welbeck, like, people are going against him because, we can't play 2 games in a week. But then he'll have 10 days off, so he could play 75 minutes in both of those games. And the thing to remember is that Tottenham and Chelsea are both so weak to the centre-forward position. They concede goals to the centre-forward position, and Brighton are pushing for that European place. Brighton, they're looking in good form. My man Black Box he shared a graphic yesterday that said they are just behind Arsenal on recent form, and Arsenal are top. Was it not in the league? You know, Arsenal 4 out of 5 wins, Brighton also 4 out of 5 wins. I think they were 8th in the top 5 leagues in Europe. They are in form, Brighton, and you know, going for a double up of their attack. You could even go for the triple up. You could even rule out Cole Palmer or Joao Pedro and go for a triple Brighton, and it might pay off. You just don't know. But those are the drafts. I prefer the stacking one at the minute. I don't know which draft I'm going to go for yet. It's too early to say. We'll see how the Man United match plays out tonight. It might well be I want a single game week player or 2. Bruno Fernandes, if he scores 5 goals tonight, he's going to be very hard to overlook. But I do think the opportunity is there to take him on. You know, Chelsea away, not the easiest game. Man United aren't the best team. You know, they're getting better, but they're not the best team. So we'll have to see later in the week, you know, when that deadline approaches and the weight of the decision truly mounts up. But if I had to pick one now, I'd go with the stacking draft because it's just fun. It's exciting. And you just never know, you know, why not go for it? Whichever you go for, I wish you the best of luck. I will be back later in the week with my team selection video. Thank you for watching. We will see you next time.